Greetings, Lighthead here, and in today's video we visit a topic that is particularly close to my heart. Yes, again, a topic more important than the privileged whining of the woke brigade, genetically engineering long-dead species that already had their time, or even global warming. A reminder that being a white man isn't inherently bad, that women are more attractive when they haven't needlessly shaved their heads, and that sports cars loaded with deadly weaponry are cool as I speak, of course, of the issue of which is the best Bond film. Bond. Those of you that saw my previous video regarding old Jimmy B being sold to Amazon, a decision which still haunts my dreams and erodes the increasingly fragile bedrock of my mind, will know my feelings towards this god-awful and profit-driven decision. In a world where standards are ignored for the sake of money, Jimbo Bondo and, by extension, all of his fans have found ourselves on the shitty end of Jeff Bezos' stick. But what's new there? So, in the face of these terrible, soulless proceedings executed by terrible, soulless people, I figured it would be nice for all of us who grew up watching the Bondster bonk his way through anything with a pulse to sit for a brief few minutes and reflect upon his great moments, and try to figure out which of his films—
I won't say movie! How many bloody times do I have to say it?
—is the greatest. And there's a correct answer to that question as far as I'm concerned. So this isn't so much a question as it is me fawning over the great, if admittedly fictional man himself. Where to begin? What is it about Bond that really makes Bond Bond? For those of you who didn't read the novels, they mostly differ greatly from the films, quite radically differently in cases like Quantum of Solace. And on that note, I'll state now that the Daniel Craig-era Bond doesn't count. That's not Bond. I mean, okay, the Casino Royale cold-as-ice attitude was actually very much Bond. But the thing about Craig's interpretation is that he starts out as a thug. That's not who Bond was in the novels. He was, as a Spectre operative explained while carving the Spectre symbol into the back of his hand while being interrogated, merely a man playing at being a spy. Bond didn't become a stone-cold killer until after this event, only becoming this at the very end of the novel where he icily informs MI6 that Vesper Lynd is dead. But otherwise, no. Craig's Bond just seems to be a reflection of the actor, whining and moaning and generally being unhappy despite being beloved by millions and adored by women, for some reason. Oh, it must have been so hard for him. So no, he's out. George Lazenby obviously doesn't count either, and On Her Majesty's Secret Service was rubbish, so bye-bye, baby! That's right. So, we have Connery, Moore, Dalton, and Brosnan remaining. Moore just wasn't Bond. Yes, more fans, he just wasn't. He might have been Roger Moore, and therefore awesome, because he just was, but he wasn't Bond. Read the books if you don't believe me. You might have been more entertained by his quippy, light-hearted take, but Bond wasn't quippy and light-hearted. He was a killer. Unfortunately, the same issue is also to be found with Brosnan's Bond. Excellent, entertaining, quippy, and, even as an hetero man, I find myself getting just as excited as the women folk when watching Pierce do his thing. But, sorry, no, he wasn't Bond. He was fantastic, and most people, including myself, would agree that GoldenEye was one of the best Bond films ever. But no, he's not the novel Bond. And as an addendum, all the other Brosnan Bond films were terrible. Not his fault, blame the producers. So, only Connery and Dalton remaining. Well, this is where things get tough. The meat sinewy. And the going hard. You see, while Connery was the original and widely agreed best, Dalton paid almost obsessive attention to the novel version of Bond. even reading the books and keeping them on him during filming to stay as abreast as the character's bearing as possible. That's some hard to quantify, and why? Well, this is the thing about the Bond films for me. Connery was cool as I mean, damn, what a guy. But Dalton played it with the greatest respect to the character. But the title of this video is Which was the best Bond film? Not Who was the best Bond. So, let's reset and identify the films themselves, which is also a bit difficult because Dalton got messed around on the legal BS and only ended up doing 2 instead of 3 films. Great. The guy who might have ultimately proved himself to be the most faithful Bond only got to do 2 films as opposed to Connery's 7. And to this end, I have to be a tad brutal and cut off Dalton's films because let's be perfectly honest, nobody remembers The Living Daylights or License to Kill. They're not bad, but lined up against the classic Connery outings, there's just no way they can stand up. It's not fair, but neither is life, and so we have but 7 films remaining. Well, okay, 6 really, because Never Say Never Again was a show of egos and aging and wigs and was generally a total mess. Even a young Kim Basinger couldn't save it. How it's supposed to be a remake or reimagining of Thunderball, I'll never know. It mostly just feels like Connery's fever dream to me. As Joey Swall would have told him,
"You need to do better.
You can always Bond me, Joey."
But whatever. I'm an art critic and I make no apologies. So, 6 films. Dr. No, From Russia With Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever. So, the crap ones, or in some cases the not as good ones, are Thunderball, which is slow, You Only Live Twice, which is far-fetched, and Diamonds Are Forever, which is comical. So we have the original 3 films remaining. Ooh, it's getting tense in here now. Dr. No was very cool, and not a million miles from the novel. However, as the original installment, it had that old issue of not quite having found its stride yet. It wasn't until Russia With Love that they hit stride, and this shows in both From Russia With Love and Goldfinger. So, 2 films remaining. Woohoo! Now, this opinion may seem less popular with many of you because Goldfinger had so much going for it. A wealthy psychopath obsessed with gold. A tough-as-nails maniac with a throwable razor-brimmed hat. A selection of particularly attractive Bond girls. And the single prettiest car ever built. The Aston Martin DB5. Oh, Lord. I'd explode an entire puppy orphanage just to own that bad boy. But no such deal exists, so relax, dog lovers. No, the greatest Bond film ever made is From Russia With Love.
From Russia.
And why? Well, because it's close to bloody perfect, that's why. The sense of the gentleman assassin, the Q-branch equipment, the Spectre assassin, who will always be the best Bond henchman, by the way, the setting, the manipulation of the female intelligence operative, Kleb, the head of Spectre and his cat, the boat chase. It's all just right. All of it. Connery's performance, the tension, the stakes. It all fits right with Fleming's novel version of Bond. Or at least it fits the closest. It's so on the money, and as I keep saying, if you don't believe me, read the books. Books are better than films anyway. That's the benefit of imagination rather than having a bunch of other people's conceptions punching you in the eyeballs every time you fire up the TV. From Russia With Love has it all, and that's despite the troubled production that was basically only saved in the editing suite. But that's another story, and one I would be most happy to relate to you if you wish to see it. Please inform me in the comments if that's something you desire. So there you go. Don't say I never give you anything. Ultimately, I would recommend reading Fleming's books because they're fantastic. They're not all action, some are more like accounts of events, Some are sad and melancholic, but all are well written and don't veer away from the character. The novel version of Bond is surprisingly deep and emotional, and a double-hard, tough-nut assassin. I'd also recommend watching From Russia with Love if you haven't seen it in a while, because it really is the dog's bollocks. And if there's one thing we all love, it's dog's bollocks. Like and subscribe!